So welcome back, everyone. We are going to start again with the Readium and Thorium session. A few words about this session. Software development comes with long hours of triage and prioritization lists. Important features have to be postponed because of uncertainty, time consumption, or technology issue. Other less significant features may be no-brainers and quick to do. It's a live process. Choices can change and evolve depending on new information or because a problem turns out more difficult to solve than expected. We usually use Kanbans to materialize and keep track of what is to do next. We play with cards, and that's a relevant allegory because you place cards accordingly to the knowledge you have of the game in your hand and the game in the hands of your partners. Luckily, as we build open source, we don't have to guess the cards in the hand of competitors. So now let's hear about the results of this triage activity as per today with Jiminy, Daniel, and Hadrien, who are part of our talented tech team and who are going to tell you about Readium and Thorium roadmap. Please welcome them.
Hello again. Yes, the idea here is that you just saw a presentation where people explain how they use the different Readium toolkits, how they use LCP. So I'm sure a lot of you are also interested in knowing, what's new, what's next, and that's very much the intent of this session. And actually, on the new side of things, we have quite a bit. So you see, we talk about Readium projects, and we talk about Thorium Suite, which is something new. You haven't seen that at a DPS event before. So let me explain what we mean. So the big question a lot of people ask me these days is, so what's Readium and what's Thorium? What's the difference? And the difference is pretty much straightforward when you look it up like this. Readium is essentially a number of toolkits. So think of it as source code. Think of it as pieces that you need to build an app. You can think of Readium as the engine in the car, for example. And we've been working on Readium for mobile for a number of years. That's what we've seen a lot of people mentioning in the previous session. But we've also been working on Readium Web, which we'll touch upon today. And so Thorium, instead of being just pieces, are full reading apps. So some of you may already know and use Thorium Reader, that I'm referencing here as Thorium Desktop. And you'll see that Thorium Desktop now has a bunch of friends with mobile and web. So we build the full product using the toolkit, but it takes quite a bit more to build a full product. And so what you're already seeing with this slide is a renewed commitment, not just in building toolkits, but also in building product from EDL Lab. So if we talk first about Readium for a bit. So when we think about Readium now, so if you go on GitHub, we have a lot of repos. So we've tried to clean things up to make it as easy as possible to understand. But we have what we think are 4 main toolkits. And the 4 main toolkits are identified by the language that are used, but those languages are very easily tied to a platform. So we have Swift. Swift is used for iOS, iPadOS, but it also works with macOS. So that's still kind of new-ish, but Apple has been trending towards more of a unified user experience, be it from a UI point of view or from a code point of view. So it's also technically possible to use the Swift toolkit on Mac devices. We have Kotlin, which is often used with Android, but it's also very useful for Chrome OS. We haven't seen any mention of Chrome OS until now, but Chrome OS is extremely popular with students in a number of countries. So being able to address this market is quite interesting as well, if you're in the education space. We have TypeScript. So for those of you who don't know TypeScript, think of it as fancy JavaScript, I guess, which is also used for building the website. And finally, we have Go, which has been mentioned by Leonard before. It's useful for building the server side of things, but as we'll see, there are a lot more use cases for the Go toolkit than we've had before, including for content aggregators, distributors, publishers. So these are the main toolkits. Aside from the main toolkits, we also have things that we think of as utility. They're utility because they power important features or they allow important workflows. So one that we've had since many, many years now is Readium CSS. So Readium CSS is all about styling, visual adjustment. It's what makes it possible to do pagination. It's what makes it possible to customize how you see things. Extremely important in an EA context, for example. Speech is really, really brand new, but it's already implemented in Thorium desktop. And speech is going to be or standalone utility for text-to-speech and read aloud. Not just for reading apps, but potentially for anything. What we envision is, for example, a website, a newspaper website on the web could use it to power a read aloud feature for any article, to give you an example. So that's new. I'm not going to talk about this one because we'll probably talk about it next year. And the last one, it's probably the most confusing one if you're not a developer. But yeah, I'll have a full slide on that one, so don't worry too much. So Readium Mobile. Readium Mobile is by far the most popular toolkit for mobile reading apps. What we see is that we have wide adoption of both Swift and Kotlin. We count 100 plus apps, I'm not counting both platforms. So when I say 100 plus, that would be 200 plus or probably 250 if we counted everything. And what's interesting is that it's used by very different type of companies. You see retailers, you see subscription services, libraries, publishers, and I think we haven't reached really the full potential of that. I think education will also benefit a lot from this in the future. And what we see is that most of the adoption for LCP is driven by Readium Mobile. So it's not too surprising because when you look at studies in different markets, you often see that smartphones are leading the way in terms of how people are reading. In most markets now, it's easy to understand. It's a device that everyone owns. It's a device that everyone has in their pockets. So it is very much the one, it's like the one thing you always have with you. That makes a lot of sense. Plus, we have those huge screens and fancy smartphones these days that makes it even better. And so what is really important for this year is that, well, EDR Lab has always been involved in the maintenance. Now, EDR Lab is very much taking over most of the work done on Readium Mobile. So that's a huge responsibility. It means we need to scale the team. It means we have to do quite a bit more, but it also puts EDR Lab in the driver's seat, which means being able to decide what are the most important pieces, evolution, for the toolkit. So that's quite important. And so being in that driver's seat, for 2025, we took the decision to have a focus on audio and accessibility. And audio is very useful for accessibility, but audio goes beyond accessibility. I think it's very easy to understand why we have such a focus. Once again, EAA, and also huge growth in adoption for audiobooks in many markets. So these are the things we're focused on for this year. Of course, mobile is ever shifting, ever changing. You have to keep up with everything that's going on. I mean, just last week we had WWDC from Apple, where they did a lot of announcements. Google did the same thing. So we're also looking at those things, and our intent is to always use the latest and greatest APIs made available. I've already mentioned accessibility. There are a lot of cool new accessibility features coming in those platforms. We also see a lot of interesting AI APIs, especially on-device AI, which are very interesting because on-device AI, you don't have all the issues that we mentioned with TDM Wrap and all that. So it's also the easiest implementation and the least problematic one we can work with. So a lot of interesting things, and we're definitely also keeping up with those. So if you look at the roadmap for a bit, so we've added quite a few things, Q1, Q2. We've added LCP, streaming over LCP-protected publication. That means you can stream an LCP-protected audiobook. That's the main use case, but potentially EPUB, potentially PDF. So streaming is now possible on both platforms. It was just available in Kotlin before. We've extended the support for accessibility metadata. We already had it, but we've aligned with the latest thing that were added to the EPUB specs. And we also have a built-in support for the display guide. So working with accessibility metadata can be complex, and making easy for everyone to understand what those accessibility metadata means is not always the easiest thing. So we're making the life of implementers easier by having that in there. Q3, we want to work, so this summer, we want to work on a brand new Read Aloud API. So we've participated to the work organized by Daisy and Dedicon on requirements for reading systems, which brings a number of new ideas that are very interesting for Read Aloud. So we really want to push the envelope. We think we're going to introduce new features that we haven't seen before in other readings apps there. And also new EPUB navigators in Kotlin coming up at the same time. And before the end of the year, we also want to push support for media overlays. So that's also important for accessibility. And as I've already mentioned in the previous presentation, we have a new enhanced support for PDS coming as well in Swift. So what's Readium Web? So Readium Web is pretty much the same thing that Readium Mobile, but for the web. So it has been used in production since 2023, but it's still in an early adopter phase if we compare it to mobile. So mobile, hundreds of apps. Here it's a bit smaller. But that said, we have a lot of interest right now about using Readium Web. For example, we've already seen an implementation from the New York University Press. They've started working on this last September, I think, and now they have a V1 ready for a few of their books. We have Nora in the room, who's also looking into using it for web reader. And the Internet Archive has already deployed also a first prototype that lives side by side with their IIIF implementation. So that's just a few names, but we think there's going to be a lot more. But yeah, we're still at the beginning, I would say, of a wider implementation. But what's important here is that we're really going for a different approach than mobile. Mobile, we only shipped toolkits. So as some of the people in the previous presentation said, you have to do a bit of extra work. We're taking a different approach with web. With web, we want to have full implementation, not just toolkits, because we think a lot of people will just take our vanilla implementation and deploy it. So we're really seeing a mix of those two. And we think this has helped a lot to drive the adoption here. Readium CLI, so that's a new utility. And it's something that's designed to do two things. So it's designed to live in an ingestion pipeline. So some of you might be ingesting thousands, if not millions, of EPUB. And usually you have EPUB check, and you have ACE. That's meant to live side by side with those two. But it's also meant to power a deployment of the web reader. So it has two roles. So it's a multi-command, multi-feature utility. And right now, so it supports two commands. So manifest allows you to extract and infer metadata. So that's very useful, for example, if you want to assess the situation of your backlist. There could be a lot of accessibility metadata that you don't have in your database, but that lives in your EPUB. So you can use it for that. And the other one, serve, is also useful for Readium and Thorium Web. We're also considering two things in the future, three things actually. Generating samples, optimizing files, and also converting back and forth between EPUB and web publication. So more on that next year.
So hi everyone, I'm Jiminy Panoz and I'm the lead developer of Readium CSS. This is the last utility we will discuss today, and then we will switch to Thorium and the apps. So Readium CSS has a new version 2, which is a major version with a lot of breakage, because it has a different philosophy. When I came back, we had to update Readium CSS after 4 years. There were features that were implemented in Thorium desktop for CGK, like letter spacing for Japanese, for example, but also hiding Ruby annotations. So we had to port that back into Readium CSS so that everyone could benefit. And it became clear that we had a lot of restrictions and side effects in Readium CSS that were not pleasing implementers. For example, you had responsive, which didn't play nicely with all the new device factors like foldables and so on and so forth. So that was removed. And we made Readium CSS just a pure library of styles that implementer can use as they wish. So now in version 2, when they apply something, it will be applied by Readium CSS without any filtering or nothing. That also applies to publisher styles. Before we had a safeguard to limit a subset of styles that you could put between such a flag. Typically a toggle with publisher styles. Now implementers can put everything they want into this toggle. It comes also with improved models. So font size has been a long standing and painful module that we had to deal with. We have a new implementation because it was rewritten from scratch. We are using Zoom right now and not some kind of voodoo magic between the scenes to handle everything. So it should work consistently with what browsers are providing because it's a standard CSS property now. It's been part of interop since 2024. And we're really happy with that because we have this implemented in Readium Web, as I will present you later. And yeah, we also had its support for variable fonts. Maybe you can think of the font weight user setting, which allows you to change the weight of a font on the Kindle or some other apps did in the past. It is now a proper citizen in Readium CSS, and you can use it directly from that. We also documented variable fonts with all the variants they are supporting, so that you can start with confidence implementing such a feature.